poet under a soldier's hat. Poet, because that is what he should have been. Soldier's hat, that is what he was obliged to wear. The officers in those days were given so much leave, it was ridiculous. 9 months every 2 years, 3 months every year, and 10 days every so often. Plus, they could put their name down for an optional list of leave of officers that didn't want to take theirs. I expect a lot of them couldn't afford it. But my father jumped at every chance so he could go into the mountains and explore, and there are a lot of adventures in this book that I cannot go into. So here he is going on leave, and shows the softer side of him. My spirits rose the nearer I got to the snow line, craning my neck from the carriage, absorbing every inch of the 17,000 foothills folded below the Himalayas. I tried to pinpoint the valley where the mountain range divided and swung north to merge with the Karakoram beyond Kashmir. I was headed for the lush wooded valleys and alpine meadows of the Siraj's remote game reserve, managed by the forestry department, where I had rented exclusive shooting and fishing rights for the next 3 months. Though my permit permitted me to hunt 1 thar, a tasty wild goat-like sheep, 1 brown bear, a snow leopard, and any quantity of small game I needed for the pot, my only interest was small game and the occasional thar. Dismounting at Patikot, the railhead for Mandi State and the Kulu Valley, I was met by the Forestry Department's shikari, my hunter guide for the next 3 months. His infectious enthusiasm made it easy for us to become friends, much as social custom allowed. We never knew one another's names. Shikari and Sahib Sir sufficed. Shikari set our first base camp in a meadow at 8,000 feet, where 2 snow-fed streams tumbled from the high valleys to form a delightful pool. Its waters so clear, I swam as though in a cloudless sky. Crawling sleepily from my tent in my underpants, I plunged with a yell into its icy waters, gasping and rolling for as long as I could stand. Goosebumped and blue, I leapt onto the sheep-cropped turf bordering the pool, threw on my robe to dry in the rising sun, my tingling skin smooth to silk. "Your chai, sir." Without change of expression or comment, Shikari handed his crazy Sahib a mug of scalding tea. By day, Shikari led me along precipitous hillsides in search of the invisible tar, whose camouflage was so perfect that even he had difficulty spotting one. I was secretly glad. Small game for the pot was thrill enough. It was rare we returned without a kalij pheasant, a hare, a snow pigeon, or a spotted chital deer. Servants, master united, content, warm around the embers of a fire, we dined together beneath the stars, kings on a carpet flying above the world. "Take the day off, Shikari. I'll trek alone today." And for the sheer exhilaration of solitude, I'd climb above the tree line to the Himalayan meadows, bright with violet gentian, peach columbine, and yellow primula. Nestled on a bed of sweet grass and wildflowers, I could only gaze and gaze and gaze some more. Sometimes, waxing lyrical, I'd let a poem burst from me like poems had from my friend Vetta's lips in the Alps. "I love thee, Himalaya, your rainbow meadows, grass fingers, your folds in which to lie above the valley of the flowers and the Kulu." He's left the army because he couldn't bear it, well, transferred to the Foreign and Political Service, where he spent 5 years in the Hadramaut, which we call the Yemen, and also in Persia, now Iran. And of course blotted his copybook all over the place and was finally sent back to his regiment in India. And the war is over, and his children are back safely in England. I could feel my India coming to a close, smell it in the air. Independence came at a price, incomes, jobs. I caught the fleeting regret in people's eyes. The battalion I escorted back to Dharamsala felt little pride in the task assigned, disposing mounds of surplus military equipment lying around Chittagong. It was as though we threw out 100 years of what Britain had struggled so hard to amass. Create a Muslim Pakistan or not? Was Gandhi, Nehru, Jinnah, or Mountbatten right or wrong? India struggled. Gandhi, close to death, lay tragically limp, refusing food in protest to the violence erupting in his beloved India. I glimpsed his actual person once. Bespectacled, bare-chested, in only a homespun dhoti, the frail man walked with the aid of a cane at the head of a crowd, accompanied by a Western woman in a white sari, India's hero. I was ashamed I had once referred to him as that half-naked fakir. Emergency was declared. Regiments not already disbanded were ordered immediately to retake control of Calcutta. Delhi HQ appointed me CO of my father's old regiment, the 3rd Gurkha Rifles, and sent me into action. August the 16th, 1946, marked the week of the Long Knives. Bloated corpses unburied in the streets became food for rats and roaming packs of pie dogs. Bodies of children, babies, women trailing blood-spattered saris, and shirtless men, eyes staring, floated down canals and rivers with the fish. Trams abandoned, spilt corpses, torched, houses flamed, burning tires spewed black, sporadic rifle fire, overflowing mortuaries, the all-pervading stench. Recurrent nightmares I'm unable to erase. Command posts were under constant terrorist attack. Caught in violent battles, our troops were forced to retaliate and attack their strongholds. For the first time I killed a man. Coming at me with a knife, his hatred blazed the 10 feet separating us. I pulled the trigger. Seeing his life force fade, something within me died. Why? Who was fighting whom? And why were Indians killing Indians when previously they'd lived in tolerance of each other's religions? The Raj, British rule, was that in vain? Had Britain failed so utterly? In a grim mood, we asked these questions. On November the 29th, 1947, mirror images of one another, Lieutenant Colonel Dunn and I, nose to nose, sword to sword, backs rigid, stood frozen in salute as the regimental band played Britain's God Save Our Gracious King. Our Union Jacks slid slowly down the flagpole for the final time. India's tricolored stripes rose to take its place, an unfurl fluttering to the crowd's mighty roar, drowning the sound of India's new national anthem. I handed over our colours and made them his, the first Indian commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel P.O. Dunn. Neither he nor I could see one another's faces for tears. We shook hands. India became India's. I no longer belonged. So I'll just close with words of my father. It rather explains why I wrote this book and why Hugh, like so many British, devoted their lives to India. I like to believe it was because they fell in love with the land and its people. Perhaps it may one day be said we bore ourselves honourably. Mankind can only follow the path of its beliefs. We could not do otherwise. So that is just full of little snippets. Hopefully you get a taste of the book. Thank you.